What would you do if a stray dog began following you, refusing to leave? Would you ignore it, or would you pause to understand why? That's the exact dilemma Officer John faced after a long and tiring shift. All he wanted was to get home, but as he walked down the deserted streets, a small, scruffy dog trailed him, matching his every step. At first, he figured it was just another stray, until something in its eyes caught his attention. There was an urgency there, almost as if it was pleading for help. When John bent down to check its collar, he made a chilling discovery. Tucked inside was a crumpled note. He unfolded it, his heart racing as he read the shaky, childlike handwriting. "My brother is sick. No food, no water. Please help. Apartment 3B. The exhaustion he'd felt moments before vanished in an instant. The dog's eyes were full of desperation, as if urging him to act. Someone needed help. A child. Alone. John's training kicked in. Stuffing the note into his pocket, he scanned the dark street and watched as the dog whimpered and trotted ahead, as though leading him. His gut told him this was more than just a welfare check. Approaching the rundown apartment complex, an uneasy feeling crept over him. The flickering streetlights cast ominous shadows, and the security gate hung loosely from its hinges. Something wasn't right. When he arrived at apartment 3B, John knocked firmly. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. Silence. Still too heavy. The dog scratched at the door, ears alert, its whines growing louder. His unease deepened. Taking a step back, John braced himself and slammed his shoulder into the door. The weak wood splintered, the lock giving way. The smell hit him immediately. Stale air, dirty clothes, spoiled food, and something more. His flashlight pierced. The dimness revealing peeling wallpaper, a toppled chair, and a pile of blankets in the corner. Then he saw them. A frail boy, no older than 8, curled up against the wall, his arms wrapped tightly around a baby. John's breath caught in his throat. The boy wasn't just thin, he was starving. His cheeks were hollow, his clothes dirty and too large. His cracked lips trembled as he held the baby close, shielding him from some unseen threat. The infant lay still, breathing shallowly, skin flushed, tiny fists barely moving. Sick, weak. John knew it immediately. The boy didn't speak, didn't cry, he just stared, wide-eyed and terrified like a trapped animal. Slowly, John knelt down, speaking softly. "Hey, kid, I'm Officer John. I'm here to help." The boy shrank back, trembling. How long had they been alone? How long had this child been fighting to survive, clinging to hope? John's chest tightened. There was no time to lose. His training told him to assess the situation, but his heart screamed to act now. The baby's breathing was too shallow, too weak. The older boy, his brother no doubt, held him with such desperation as if letting go meant losing him forever. "Hey, buddy," John said gently. "Your brother needs a doctor. We have to go, okay?" The boy flinched, his grip tightening. Fear, mistrust. He'd been alone for too long. John exhaled, steadying himself. "I promise. I won't let anything bad happen." Silence filled the room for a moment before the boy gave a slow, reluctant nod. That was all John needed. He carefully, lifted the baby into his arms, shocked by how light he was, fragile, malnourished, and weak. The older boy clung to John's jacket as if afraid to let go. The dog barked once and then darted ahead, as if leading the way. Outside, John radioed for an ambulance, his heart racing. Sirens wailed in the distance. The boy's tiny fingers twisted into John's sleeve, his breath shaky. "You're safe now," John reassured him, but as he looked down at the frail baby in his arms, he knew the fight wasn't over. At the hospital, John sat beside the boy in the waiting area, his leg bouncing nervously. He'd seen neglect before, abandoned kids. But this case, this boy, felt different. The child sat stiffly, his fists clenched in his lap. His clothes hung loosely on his small frame, his shoes worn and full of holes. How long had he been surviving? Like this? John exhaled slowly. What's your name? The boy hesitated, barely moving his lips. Ethan. John nodded, his voice gentle. And your brother? Gabriel, the boy whispered. The baby, the one barely hanging on when John found them. John's jaw clenched. Where are your parents, Ethan? The boy hunched his shoulders as if bracing for something. He swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. They left. A simmering anger tightened in John's chest. Ethan stared at the floor. A few weeks ago, he murmured. They said they'd come back, but... His voice faltered. He swallowed hard, blinking back tears. They never did. Weeks. This child, this 8-year-old, had been alone, taking care of a sick baby for weeks. No food, no water, no one to turn to. John's fists clenched. No child should ever have to endure that. Did they leave you anything? He asked carefully. Ethan shook his head. Just a note, he murmured, his voice hollow. They said they'd find help, that I had to stay strong. John exhaled sharply. Stay strong? No. They hadn't gone to find help. They had abandoned them. Leaning forward, John placed a steady hand on Ethan's shoulder. You don't have to do this alone anymore. For a long moment, Ethan didn't move. Then, slowly, so slowly, his tiny fingers unfurled from their clenched fists. He wasn't sure if he believed John yet, but for the first time in weeks. He wanted to. John had never planned on taking care of 2 kids, but after that night, there was no way he could send them back to an uncertain fate. Ethan and Gabriel were placed in emergency foster care, but John couldn't shake the feeling. The thought of them in a stranger's home, frightened and alone, gnawed at him. So after a whirlwind of late-night calls and mountains of paperwork, John did something he never expected. He brought them home. His apartment wasn't exactly child-friendly, but he made do. A crib for Gabriel in the spare room, a makeshift bed on the couch for Ethan. The first night, Ethan barely spoke, just curled up with Charlie, the little dog now living with them. The next morning, John tried his hand at breakfast. It didn't go well. Smoke detectors blared as he frantically waved a towel over a pan of charred pancakes. Ethan covered his face, but not before John caught a glimpse of something, a small, fleeting smile. I hope you don't cook like this every day, Ethan muttered. John sighed. Not usually, but I had to impress my new roommates, Ethan. Shook his head, biting back a grin. Charlie wagged his tail, happily devouring the ruined pancakes, and for the first time, John heard Ethan laugh. Weeks passed. Slowly, Ethan began to open up. He was still quiet, still guarded, but little by little, the walls came down. He no longer flinched at sudden noises. He even started setting the table without being asked. Then, one afternoon, the knock came. John opened the door to find a woman, standing there, disheveled, hollow-eyed, unsteady. Where are my kids? She demanded, her voice cracking. I came back for them. Ethan froze. His face went blank, but his hands curled into fists. John stepped between them. You left. Them, he said firmly. For weeks, no food, no water. Tears welled in her eyes. I was trying to fix things, she whispered. I didn't mean to. Ethan's voice, small but strong, cut through the moment. You weren't going to come back. She flinched. Ethan stared at her for a long time, then slowly moved behind John. That was all John needed to see. He turned back to the woman. You need to leave. Her lips parted as if to argue, but then she just turned and walked away. That night, Ethan didn't say anything, but at bedtime he whispered, she wasn't going to stay, was she? John swallowed hard. Nobody, she wasn't. After Ethan's mother left for the last time, John sat alone in his truck, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. He was just tired. Tired of seeing kids like Ethan and Gabriel abandoned. Tired of watching children carry burdens they never should have to. Tired of the world letting them down, again and again. And yet, Ethan still hoped. Even after everything, there was a part of him that still waited for someone to prove him wrong, to show him that not every adult disappeared, that not every promise was empty. John took a slow, steady breath. His fingers tightened slightly around the wheel. Then he glanced at the stack of paperwork on the passenger seat. The bold letters at the top of the first page seemed to stare back at him, heavy with meaning. He exhaled. His chest rose and fell under the weight of a decision that, in reality, wasn't even a decision anymore. It wasn't something he was debating. It wasn't something he had to think twice about. It wasn't a question anymore. It was a promise. A promise that Ethan and Gabriel would never feel alone again. A promise that they wouldn't wake up one morning to find themselves abandoned. A promise that this was forever. That night, John sat across from Ethan at the kitchen table. The adoption papers lay neatly between them, the air thick with unspoken words. John cleared his throat, keeping his voice steady. "I've been thinking," he started, drumming his fingers lightly on the table. "What if we made this official?" Ethan's small frame stiffened. His fingers curled into the fabric of his oversized sleeves, knuckles turning white. His whole life had been a series of uncertainties, of temporary shelters, of people who came and went. Feeling wanted was something he had never dared to believe. He swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper as he cautiously pulled the papers closer, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar words. You really want to keep us?" The vulnerability in his voice nearly shattered John. John felt his throat tighten, emotion swelling in his chest, something he couldn't quite name. There wasn't an ounce of hesitation in his response, or yes, than anything. Ethan's gaze lifted, searching John's face for any sign of doubt, any hint that this was just another well-meaning promise waiting to be broken. But he found none. John's expression was steady, certain. And then Ethan nodded. It was such a small moment, so simple, and yet it carried the weight of an entire lifetime. In John's arms, Ethan's thin frame trembled as he clung to his shirt like it was the only thing keeping him from drifting away. No hesitation, no resistance, just raw, desperate relief. He had been strong for so long, too long, and for the first time he didn't have to be. For the first time, Ethan wasn't just surviving, he was home. And John, he finally understood what family really meant. The day the judge finalized the adoption, Ethan never let go of John's sleeve. When asked the big question, "Do you want Officer John to be your father?" his voice was strong and sure. Yes. John signed the final papers, sealing what they had already become, a family. That night, the house was livelier than ever. Charlie barked with excitement. Gabriel chattered happily in his high chair, and Ethan, sitting at the table, smiled freely for the first time. John placed a plate of spaghetti in front of him. "Tonight, we celebrate." Ethan twirled his fork in the noodles, raising an eyebrow. "You sure you didn't burn anything?" "This time?" John feigned offense. "Excuse me, but I happen to be a professional chef now." "Uh-huh." Gabriel clapped his hands, giggling as Charlie attempted to steal a meatball from his tray. Ethan's laughter filled the room. Warm, unrestrained, real. John leaned back, watching the joyful chaos unfold. The kind of chaos that felt just right. For the first time in a long time, Ethan wasn't worried about tomorrow. That night felt different. The house had settled into a peaceful quiet, wrapped in the warmth of a sleepy evening. Gabriel had already drifted off in his crib, his tiny chest rising and falling rhythmically. Charlie was curled up at the foot of Ethan's bed, twitching in a dream. John smoothed the blanket over Ethan's shoulders, tucking him in, a routine that had become familiar, safe. "Good night, buddy," John said softly, standing up to leave. Just as he reached the door, "Dad." The word was small, hesitant, as if it had been trapped in Ethan's throat for weeks, maybe even longer. John froze. The air between them grew heavy, time itself seeming to still. Slowly he turned around. Ethan stared at the ceiling, his fingers clenched into the fabric of his blanket. He looked like he wanted to take it back, as if the weight of that single word was too much. John swallowed hard, his voice quieter now. Yeah? Ethan exhaled shakily, his grip loosening. A long pause, a moment of quiet understanding, then, barely above a whisper, "Good night, Dad." Something cracked open in John's chest, something raw, deep, permanent. He walked back, sat on the edge of the bed and placed a gentle hand on Ethan's head. "Good night, kiddo." Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He simply let out a soft breath, his body easing completely. For the first time tonight, he chose to believe, and John, he'd never let him doubt it again.